But one of the benefits of having ADHD is your ability to hyperfocus. And thank goodness I have that. But it takes an amazing amount of danger or risk for me to hyperfocus. Mm-hmm. So when I played rugby, if I don't hit somebody right, I'm going to injure myself just as worse than they are. Or if I don't take a hit good, I'm going to get really beat up. Same thing with disarming a bomb. If I can't focus, I'm dead. I'm gone.
Yeah. Today's guest is my friend Courtney Buck, a combat vet turned entrepreneur with a career that's as explosive as it gets. From disarming roadside bombs in Afghanistan as a U.S. Army explosive ordnance disposal or EOD technician to shaping global health policy at USAID and the CDC, Courtney's journey is a masterclass in resilience and strategic risk-taking. He opens up about his experience at the CDC during COVID, where he faced ridicule and harassment, witnessing firsthand how people's fear clashed with science. He also discussed some of his work at the USAID, having witnessed the three-legged stool of defense, diplomacy, and development that once countered Soviet sway now falter against China's rise. As a husband and father of four in Florida, his EOD-honed grit shapes a life of calculated risks and shares why raising four kids with a no-pigeonholing mindset is his most meaningful mission yet. Courtney's life is a study of calm to chaos and clarity to complexity. Let's start the show. Courtney Buck, thanks so much for being on, man. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Likewise. I'm looking off to the side here because I want to refer to this. Just to set the table for the audience here, I want everybody to understand the scope of experience that you have, because it is unique. It is a lot of work to get the skills that you have, and it's not without its own pain, physically, mentally, spiritually, I'm sure. So you've got a bachelor's of science and technology from Missouri University, and then a master's in international relations. I only give that as a background because your professional experience is staggering. I'm sort of going to fly through this and I'm going to butcher it, but I think people need to understand the breadth and depth of what you bring to the table, which is why I wanted to have you on.
Sure.
Just for marking this. This is March 28th, so I think it's worthwhile to frame that March 28th, 2025, as it relates to, and I'm not attempting to get political here. I'm interested in politics, but I'm a lot more interested in the experience of those people on the ground and sort of what this all means. But there have been the closing of several departments, which we'll get into in a second, and you can speak to directly.
Sure.
So quickly setting the table, I'm going to let you speak, by the way. I know this is coming out of the gates here, but you've had a series of military and intelligence roles for over 12 years, most notably explosive ordnance disposal technician, which, for lack of a better word, is a hurt locker, just to put things into perspective for listeners. Is that a fair assessment?
Not quite as sexy, but yeah, my job was to disarm bombs, roadside bombs, IEDs, car bombs.
Okay.
As part of the team, not just me.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. You were part of the Presidential Protective Detail. You've been deployed to Afghanistan. You were an economic intelligence officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. You've been deployed to Iraq. You've supervised over 4,500 hours of manned and unmanned ISR aircraft, which I want to get into. You are a Presidential Management Fellow, which I think is worth also exploring. You're part of the U.S. Army Reserve. Public health and international policy roles include services at the CDC, which I certainly want to dig into, which was during or preceding or during COVID. Is that correct?
Preceding and during and well into. Okay.
You were a desk officer for Thailand, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, Georgia, Ethiopia, Zika virus liaison officer. The list sort of goes on and on. Senior health policy analyst at the CDC. Now you're an entrepreneur in the private sector. But I just wanted to get a little bit of the frame of reference here. What I did not include, last but not least, was the Presidential Management Fellow was with the USAID. So yes. I want to start this conversation off with the USAID because that seems to be the biggest point of interest for me personally, because I don't think many people understand really what it does. Despite all my research, I don't think I'm scratching more than the surface. And so for the benefit of the audience, I did do a little bit of research. So I'm going to read this real quick, and then I'm going to flip it over to Courtney so you guys can stop listening to me speak. Real quick. So the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, was established in 1961 from a push by an executive order of JFK as a countermeasure to Russian influence and to integrate several aid agencies that were already in existence. It is an independent U.S. government agency responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance for over 100 countries, focusing on global health, disaster relief, socioeconomic development, and with an annual budget that has reached up to $40 billion, which was fiscal year 2023, it represents less than 1% of the federal budget. USAID is overseen by the Secretary of State. A couple more sentences. Over its 64-year history, it has achieved significant successes such as aiding Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, supporting Ukraine post-2022 Russian invasion. Despite facing challenges like political scrutiny and funding uncertainties, USAID plays a crucial role in promoting sustainable development and advancing U.S. foreign policy interests. Its potential absence could lead to increased global poverty and a decline in U.S. influence, as it was originally founded to counter Soviet influence during the Cold War by fostering development and democracy. Side note, a lot of that was helped by AI. So there are potentially flaws in what I just said. Don't anybody take it as fact, but I wanted to give some context. So starting with USAID, thank you for listening, Courtney. Can you just give us a sense of what you did in it and what's your take on its influence, contribution, not just to the development of third world countries and the like, but also as a matter of self-defense, national defense, on a global stage. And I'll let you take it from there, but I just wanted to give you some context on sort of where I was interested in first exploring.
So if you see me turn my head, I'm making notes as you go.
Please.
So this is great. So let's take a little bit of a step back and talk about just American foreign policy at the most highest level. And it used to be that it was strictly defense. So we were the strongest person in the sandbox after World War II. We defeated the Japanese and Germany. We hope to settle Europe and make it more profitable, more democratic, and move it forward and take it away from communist influence. And the same thing happened in Japan and Southeast Asia. But as time has gone on, American foreign policy, and I should add in here, I no longer work for the government, so I can be a little more free in what I say. So some of these are not only opinions, but what I've actually seen and saw and have experienced firsthand. Used to, when I would get interviewed, I'd have to put in a 3-minute asterisk on my that these were my opinions only. So American foreign policy is it's a three-legged stool. First is defense, and I'll break it down to just the simplest way I can. If American foreign policy was a sandbox, defense is you protect your sandcastle, you protect your friend's sandcastle, you help people who are more vulnerable. That's one leg of it. The second leg is diplomacy. That's making friends with your buddies in the sandbox. That's what the State Department's really good at. And every country across the world has some kind of diplomatic mission to either establish better trade, make friends where they didn't have friends, maintain friendships. So that's the second leg. The third leg, which has become kind of flown under the radar for years, is development. And that's where USAID comes into play. So you mentioned how we were trying to help out people, especially in Europe, distance themselves from the Communist Manifesto and the communist influence. Well, we're trying to do that now, not just for communism, but just for when you help people in the sandbox, protect their sandcastle, make friends in other sandboxes, and then if their sandcastle gets knocked down, you can help them build it back up. That's such a basic example, but that's the most simplified way I can explain it. What are they going to think? They're going to think, oh, Marcus is a great guy. He helped me build my sandcastle back up. That's what we wanted to do in the United States. We started international development programs in the 60s. I think it was JFK that started them, to basically make friends, take influence away from our adversaries. And that's something that we've continued to do. So when I started at USAID, that was 2013, I had just finished up my master's degree and I applied to this thing called the Presidential Management Fellowship. And I didn't think I was going to get in. There was only two or 300 slots and nearly 10,000 people applied. And you had to have a PhD, a JD, or a master's degree just to apply. And everybody at the table was Ivy League Northeast guys. And here I was from a state college, a tech school that nobody had ever heard of in Missouri. But not to pat myself on the back, but I brought something that most people couldn't. And that was a time overseas disarming bombs. And it was a little more entertaining for the interviewers to interview me. So I made that, and I went in and I immediately started working in the office of the administrator. And the technical name was the Executive Secretariat. It's not a secretary. We're the intermediary of foreign policy between the administrator and the State Department and the White House, and then intelligence agencies in DC as well. So we would work on not only processing his communications between those organizations, but those organizations and the rest of the world that we worked with development. So we had different offices, whether it was sanitation offices, good governance offices, immediate disaster offices, like you mentioned Haiti. When Haiti got struck by the earthquake, that was an immediate assistance. But if you work on sanitation, it means you're helping dig wells, drill wells in South Sudan and provide good pipelines that are clean pipelines to bring water to different cities. That's long-term projects. So that's USAID, and at a 30,000 foot view, we want to make friends. We want to keep those friends. We want to take away influence from our adversaries. And I can say this now after working in Botswana. When I worked in Botswana for a little bit before we met. China is all over Africa for various reasons. There's a very large China.
Because I was going to ask specifically about it.
Yeah, and you look at all the different construction projects that are happening in that specific country and other countries that I visited. A lot of them are Chinese funded. The manpower, the cranes, the goods, and they're kind of beating us to the punch where we were lagging for decades because we were focusing on mainly wars in the Middle East. And we weren't able to effectively go into Africa and other parts of the world to maintain a presence, to be that good guy in the sandbox, to help people where they need help. So China's had a big influence in Africa. And I think most Americans don't know about it, but we're gonna feel it when it comes to rare earth metals, critical earth metals, and other goods.
Well, I want to scratch that a little bit because it's not just that we're making good friends. There's some self-interest there, right? And I think what China's doing now in Africa is probably the strongest case study on this. And I'm wondering if you can help to sort of fast forward 10, 15 years for the audience to understand where you think, well, how does that manifest into true advantage for the Chinese government and its people? Relative to us. I mean, part of that is, that assistance effectively defends against our intrusion to some degree, right? If they're already solving problems for some of these African countries, those African countries don't need the solution to come from the U.S. any longer. So that problem has been solved. And so we get relegated as a nation outside of the boundaries of assisting them. So there's a little bit of a defense mechanism, but why is that so important?
Yeah, I guess let me back up before I give you a forward example, and I'll back up while I'm trying to think of a good forward example. When 9/11 happened over 20 years ago, and we were going to invade and go into Afghanistan, we went to Pakistan, and we'd been helping Pakistan for years, decades, with foreign aid and teaching their soldiers over here how to fight.
Can you give us some examples? So we're sending U.S. military to aid in their training.
And we're bringing them over here as well. We're bringing them to our bases to train.
We're sending money to private sectors there to continue to build their businesses. Are we sending our own private businesses over there?
There's earthquakes all the time over there. So we're building up development projects, usually infrastructure projects, large infrastructure projects, schools, sanitations, sewer systems, how to make concrete better. So when you have an earthquake, your 3-story apartment complex doesn't fall in on itself, which happens all the time when there's earthquakes. I think there was a earthquake this morning somewhere in Southeast Asia.
Myanmar,
We make concrete buildings in America really well. Western Europe does a great job too. South Asia, not so much. So when there's a natural disaster there, buildings collapse. It just turns into one big concrete pancake. So we were teaching them, that's one example, but we were teaching them how to do things better, or how to inoculate their cattle, or how to breed cattle, having cattle programs where you teach people how to, I don't know how to do this, but how to breed cattle properly to make bigger, healthier, fatter cattle to be able to feed their population.
And all the people on the ground are U.S. government employed, or are you contracting out to
contracting out? That is key. And I'll bring this up when we talk about COVID. You don't want people that look like us from the United States coming in saying, you're not doing it right. We're going to teach you how to do it. It's just, it looks horrible. You want to partner with organizations on the ground who are reputable, have not just the financial means, but the ability to track things financially, because we're giving them a lot of money. They got to track, and we need proof that they're doing the things that we want them to do. Now, yes, it is in good faith, but when 9/11 happened, Condoleezza Rice calls up the president of Pakistan and tells, we're going to use your bases. We're going to use your land as a jumping off point. We didn't, for the most part, but that bought us a lot of influence. We didn't have to ask permission so much. We said, we're going to do this. We just were attacked. They're coming from this part of Afghanistan. You're going to play well with us right now.
Well, I think that's a great example of how China could be using Africa as well.
Absolutely.
Not just from a physical presence, but also building that infrastructure, gaining intelligence on the ground, not just geographically and with personnel, but you can actually start to, at this point, I think in our technological development, build an infrastructure there that you can start to use as a leveraging point for, if nothing else, propaganda, but certainly to influence outcomes on a more international stage as pawns, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget sitting on top of the Massa Square Hotel, sitting by the pool, having a drink, and I'm looking out over downtown Gaborone, Botswana, and I'm seeing Chinese company building their infrastructure. And I'm like, oh, we're a decade behind. We can help them as much. I was there for an HIV program called PEPFAR that George W. Bush set up. And it's a fantastic program if you ever have a chance to look into it. It's helped a lot of people survive AIDS, HIV. But we're way behind. Now we were concentrating on the immediate task at hand of Iraq and Afghanistan, but now we're catching up. Not even catching up right now. At this point, we are throwing it off. We're kicking the dead horse off to the side of the road, and we're not following up on those programs that we had established.
Well, when you saw that the USAID was eliminated completely, what were some of the first thoughts you had relative to its ramifications?
I had two. The first one was, I was thinking of all the people in these countries that are going to lose these projects. And I see the long-term value, not just strategically, but for the actual little girl or a little boy who's going to get clean water on the ground. A lot of these projects are dead, or they're not going to be completed, or the money is just going to disappear and they're not going to use it the way that we want them to. The second one is 10,000 people literally just got laid off.
Yeah.
And let's see, 2,000 of those 10,000 people work in DC, and I knew hundreds of them. Some of these people were military veterans like me. Some of them did 20 years in the military service and put in 10 or 15 years, and then they just showed up and said they don't have computer access. They can't fulfill their obligations overseas. The people they've been interacting with, they're not able to help anymore. I was so upset. So people are losing out on great projects overseas, and 10,000 people lost their job. And about 8,000 of those people were foreign workers that are contracted by the United States government.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Well, we can transition to another subject because I think there's a lot to cover here. But what are some of the projects you're most proud of relative to the USAID? And also, what do you think most people don't understand about USAID?
I think most people in the United
States.
To be honest,
I think this is the first time most people have even heard of that term.
This sounds horrible. I didn't hear about it until they came and recruited me. I was working at Hurlburt Field Air Force Base, which is a special operations base here in Florida. And that's close to where I live now. But I was working on different programs, and I was in the military. And I got this presidential management fellowship from 2013 to 15. I had no idea what these folks did. And then I got to go see like the broad range of things they did, from making sure there was enough food and grain and meat and people's stores and grain silos to be able to feed their country. It sounds petty, but like, I go to Whole Foods all the time and I'm like, oh, they don't have gluten-free today. You just think of what petty thing you want to think about. Like these people, their day-to-day survival is, oh, do I have bread tomorrow? I hope I have bread.
Right.
I hope I have clean water so my 4-year-old doesn't die of dysentery tomorrow.
And you've seen this firsthand.
Yes. Yeah.
That changes the perspective.
Hell yes. Sorry about that. But yes, it does.
Speak freely. This isn't a government program.
That's true. But yeah, it resets your mind of what's really important. And yeah, I get upset by traffic, but our roads are awesome for the most part in the United States.
Right.
Like in Afghanistan, it might take you 6 hours to go 10 miles because they have to rebuild part of the road that washed out the night before. Like, I've seen this in multiple countries.
All right. So we can't have this conversation and not talk about your explosive ordnance disposal experience. So how did you get into it? I mean, how do you find yourself in that role?
Through a fraternity, brother. I went to the Missouri University of Science and Technology and studied economics and mathematics. That's super nerdy. It's way nerdy, but I was kind of a wild child in college. I played rugby and I was in fraternity. I studied hard, but I played just as hard. So I was that nerdy kid who always got in trouble.
For the record, because people can't realize this, but you're a big boy. You're well over 6 feet, and you're a very strong dude.
6'3", about 250.
Yeah,
with a little fluff, but
sure,
I'm good for rugby.
That fluff.
Yeah. So I was getting close to graduation. 9/11 had already happened. I had graduated in 2003. So I'm looking at my life, and most of the mathematicians that were coming out of my school or economists were picked up by finance firms to do quantitative analysis. And to me, that sounded like the worst job in the world. I did not want to sit at an Excel sheet like I do now and analyze it all day long. But that's what the prospect was to go work or go to grad school and get a master's or a PhD. So I was talking to a fraternity brother. He had just come back from the invasion of Iraq. He's like, guys, there's these guys over there. They wear bomb suits and drive robots, and they tear apart these things called roadside bombs, IEDs, car bombs. And I thought that was the coolest thing. So I went down that day and talked to the recruiter. And
you don't have any background. Your family is not military?
My parents aren't, but I have plenty of aunts and uncles that were Vietnam vets.
Okay.
Yep. So I went down and did it. I enlisted. I had to wait a few months to ship out, but I sold my car, broke up with my girlfriend, and I was just like off to the adventure, a young man's adventure back in 2003. And a year later, I graduated at UOD school and was sent to Fort Riley, Kansas. And about a year after that, I went to Afghanistan the first time. And
so what's the gradient like? I mean, from basic training to actually being deployed into combat zones?
Say again? What was the first part?
What's the gradient like? I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a point where you're comfortable going into that. I could be wrong, but it seems like a tall order to be thrust into that environment. But my understanding is that there is an acclimating process where you start to engage with more of those situations to, for lack of a better word, get used to being in those environments. So I guess really the bottom question to me is like, were you comfortable going into those combat zones at the time that you were actually deployed, or was there still a lot of hesitation? I mean, are you just being thrown off a cliff and being told to survive?
So I was thinking of two different scenarios where I call them my oh shit scenarios. Like, oh my God, this is about to happen or get real. There was actually 3. The first one was all my drill instructors and all the cadre, which are the instructors at basic training, all of them had been to Iraq and Afghanistan at that point. So they were coming back with stories of invasion. So this just got real. They're like, all you guys are getting deployed. This war is going to last forever. So that got real fast. Mm-hmm. The second one was I was at Eglin Air Force Base where the EOD school is located. And we were in air phase. So everything that can be dropped from the air, shot from the air, we're learning how to disarm as well. The instructors who are normally peppy and jovial and joking with dark, twisted senses of humor, none of them were joking that day. Mm-hmm. And they had known one of their buddies that got killed. And they came up class by class and said, hey, so-and-so, Staff Sergeant so-and-so was killed. Are you prepared to do this? If you don't want to do it, you can drop on request and we'll send you to another school. And some people just stood up from their training field and left and got transferred to other military schools. Not that I'm sick or twisted, but I just love that challenge of doing something so hard and playing chess with the devil. I just thought I wasn't celebrating it, but I was also like, this is what I signed up for. I didn't want to sit at a desk. I want to do something crazy. And the third time was I went to Afghanistan, and literally the first night we were there, me and my team were in 3-man teams, unloaded all of our equipment off the Chinook, pulled it to where we were going to be sleeping that night. And as we're walking to the B hut, which is this really crappy cardboard and wooden hut that we sleep in, non-insulated, I passed a guy. He's an infantry guy who were just trigger pullers. He was laying on his side with his hands over his head like this, throwing up, and he had gotten close to an IED that day. He got real close to getting killed, but the overpressure got him, and he was throwing up constantly. And that made me like turn white, get real pale. I felt myself get cold, like, oh, I could die tomorrow. So that got real.
What kind of pressure did you just say?
Overpressure. So whenever you see a bomb go off on a YouTube video and you see that little shock wave that comes off of it, that's compressed air. So overpressure.
So, I was actually I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or somewhere else, but I just saw a report about the brain damage that people can suffer just from that air pressure going through your orifice, from your eyes or your nose into your brain primarily, which is part of what induces that nausea as well, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to turn off your listeners, but if they just want the reality of the case, if I'm near a bomb that goes off, the human body, the extremities, your arms and legs can take a ton of damage and you can live. But you have lungs here. Those are just open orifices of air. When you get next to a bomb that goes off, those get compressed. And where does that air want to go? Up your esophagus, up into your sinus cavities, into the base of your brain. So think of like a jet of air getting like shoved up through your throat. Some of it comes out your mouth, but a lot of it hits your brain. And if it hits you at a sideways, you played sports, right? Like if you've ever been hit, your head is moving, but your brain is sitting in liquid basically and hits the side of your head. So there's a couple different ways to get
concussion you can get.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Well, and that's like, I think most people think of bombs and they assume the shrapnel is certainly worthy of consideration, but I don't think people think about the pressure as among the most threatening of the threats.
It's absolutely threatening.
Can you share any experiences while you were disarming that stand out as, meaningful as a lesson learned, as something that shaped how you perceive reality? I would imagine every one of them does, but.
Yeah, one makes me laugh, and it shouldn't, but a lot of bomb technicians have kind of a gallows humor.
I think you have to, don't you?
Yeah, you really do. I remember we called it the KG Pass. It was the Kaust to Gardez Pass, and it's just a road you can look up in eastern Afghanistan, and it's really mountainous, unpaved. It's soft dirt, so bombs can be dug in real easy and then covered back up, and you have no idea that it's there. Well, one was found, and myself and my team leader had to go dig it out of the ground. Like it didn't explode. It was supposed to, but it didn't. And you have this cord that comes out of it called detonation cord. It looks like a little tiny rope, but it's just filled with explosives. And it goes off to the side of this gully. And it had rained the night before, partially dried up. So think of like a bomb in really crappy concrete. It wouldn't easily come out. So we had to take a pick, like a miner's pick and shovel, and dig this thing out of the ground.
Hoping that it doesn't detonate.
Hoping it doesn't detonate. In my pick, like a miner's pick, like digging a gold mine, I am having to dig around it like that in the middle of the night with our commander, who was a captain, who's like 28 years old, with a flashlight, like this down at the bomb, so I don't hit the detonation cord and make it accidentally go off. That that was wild. And so we dug it out of the ground. And
what's fascinating to me about this is you have to have a very unique relationship to death.
Yes.
Because I don't know if there's anyone who can. You are second to none as it relates to staring death in the face repeatedly. It's almost like you're poking the bear.
Yeah, but the bear never wakes up, and if he does, you're not going to know it because you'll be dead. I'm sorry, it's just that way.
No, because I think that's a very philosophical way to apply to reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess look, my mind's spinning a little bit because I'm trying to figure out. My first thought is that is almost meditative in a way. There is no you can study a lifetime to achieve that level of focus. And maybe the closest thing I might come to is being on a cliff, walking where death is immediately in front of you. And you're not thinking about the email you need to send out when you're on that cliff. You're not worried about, how your cousin is doing. You are just worried about where you're going to put your foot.
Yes.
And that is not, and please don't any listener think that I'm comparing the two. That's the closest thing I can relate to what you're going through. How does that apply to how you view everyday life? I sort of wonder, the monkey mind, the noise that a lot of us face, you don't, because being in the real world seems insignificant.
So I'll answer that in two sections. I'll go back to when you mentioned your ability to focus. So I was recently diagnosed, actually in the last couple of years, with moderate ADHD. My ability to focus and sit down and stay, rational and work on Excel spreadsheets, it's really hard. It's very, very hard for me. I'm very extroverted. I love talking to people. But one of the benefits of having ADHD is your ability to hyperfocus. And thank goodness I had that. But it takes an amazing amount of danger or risk for me to hyperfocus. Mm-hmm. So when I played rugby, if I don't hit somebody right, I'm going to injure myself just as worse than they are. Or if I don't take a hit good, I'm going to get really beat up. Same thing with disarming a bomb. If I can't focus, I'm dead. I'm gone.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, I'm so far removed from it now. I've been out of it for 3 or 4 years as far as like traveling overseas to more dangerous places. I catch myself being pissed off like, oh, it's there. Look at all the pollen on my car. I'm going to have to go get that washed today. And I feel sorry for myself for half a second. And I'm like, Courtney, come on, pull yourself out of it. Like you have nothing to complain about. But yeah, it's being in those kind of places where things are just dangerous. Like you had the LA fires close to where you were at. Things got real fast for people, and they probably see life in a different light right now. But give them about 10 more years, some of that will be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that gets embedded in your DNA at all? Where
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring up ADD and the ability to focus relative to near death. I recently have been rewatching this documentary called The Alpinist. It was just about this young guy who is a climber, but is a climber in all sorts of conditions, not just in dry conditions, but also up without ropes, by the way. He's climbing faces that are extraordinary by every measure. But he struggled with ADD. He in class could never identify with anyone. He was sort of a loose cannon. He hated it. But when he gets on the mountain, it's totally different. He finds a peace that it's just a fascinating concept to me, because I think so few people can attain that level of. I would imagine there's some serenity in it. Because when you're approaching a bomb, if you're starting to think about how dangerous this is, how not to fuck up, you're gone. You're sort of not in the moment anymore. So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to process how you might go through it, because it seems like redirecting the focus from the fear. You have to just there is no more present state of mind than accomplishing the mission, for lack of a better word.
It is super peaceful. It is super peaceful until after the fact. Like when you get back to base, like most of us would go work out and lift weights, because we're all a bunch of knuckleheads. Yeah. We'd lift weights afterwards, just kind of because you don't want to go to bed right after that. You don't want to think about your own mortality. You want to go you want to go lift some heavy iron and go eat a big meal.
Yeah.
And come down from that, because that takes a lot out of you. And it's also super peaceful in this way. So for the most part, the bombs that we're disarming have been found already. Of course, we're looking for secondary and tertiary bombs that could be hidden. Like they could use that main one as a plant to kill us, make it obvious to find. But it's surrounded by security, our Afghan National Army and our own guys. And infantry guys, I love infantry guys. They are so wildly intense until it hits the fan, and they're just cool and calm. And you just hear crackles of radios, and they're all there for you to protect you. So if somebody starts shooting at you from a mountain, all hell is going to break loose. Mm-hmm. They will take so much pleasure in lighting that mountainside up to protect you.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that just feels so good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a unifying theme there that I don't think you can find in civilian life.
I've struggled with that really bad. Like I love the flexibility I have in my life. I love being at home most of the time. But my wife, who also deployed multiple times, she was in the Air Force. Like some days we just sit around and think how much fun it would be to deploy again. And I shouldn't think like that. I feel ugly even thinking that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice. You miss it.
Yeah, it's crazy to hear you say that. I think a lot of people listening are going to think that's, but the way you describe it to me is completely practical.
It's simplified.
And it's almost like once you go there, your threshold has been so reestablished that it'll never come back to a baseline close to what a civilian has without that experience.
If you haven't watched it yet, Sebastian Junger is an author, and he's also a documentarian. He's done a couple from Afghanistan, and you'll see why those guys miss it. Like there's nothing up on that mountain that a normal 18 to 21-year-old wants. There's no women, there's no booze, there's no parties, there's no cool cars, there's nothing except camaraderie, the most ultimate camaraderie, and being able to prove your mettle every day.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately, it's addictive.
Well, that bond, I mean, we're seeking bonds. I think you don't take anything to the grave except the bonds you have.
Yes.
And that may be with people, but it can also be with activities and what you do and who you are. I want to move off from this, but before we do, there's a couple of questions that I want to address. One is just from a science sort of nerdy take. Are you guys measuring your physiology during that time frame? Because I would imagine you need a heart rate that you can't be at 165 beats a minute while you're trying to disarm a bomb.
Not at that time.
Were there any mental exercises you were doing, or is it just a matter of acclimatizing yourself to those situations?
No, it was purely at that time. You have to
be in shape too, right?
Every one of us were wildly in shape, and not like we would go out and do Ironmans, but like we all lifted weights. We just loved getting in the gym because you had to wear an 80-pound bomb suit where 2/3 of the weight's up front and then possibly carry a monstrous bomb or a person who's injured while wearing that thing.
Yeah.
So we takes your HIIT workouts to another level.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But there was nothing at that time. I was in from 2004 to 2008 on active duty. It wasn't until 2008 that the U.S. government was like, we're seeing these guys come back with head injuries, but they also have all these residual issues with it. So finally, the science was just starting to catch up to the issues.
What other residual injuries?
Oh, like residual symptoms, like massive headaches or orientation issues, like spatial awareness, short-term memory issues. Not so much for long-term.
Sure.
Pituitary glands that were damaged because the pituitary gland where it sits in your brain, like, could get more easily damaged. Hormone issues, testosterone issues, estrogen management. What else? Like some anger issues for people.
Sure.
But some of those overlap with PTSD. So a lot of people would just chalk it up to PTSD at that point.
But PTSD is sort of like when the doctor tells you, this is a result of stress. It's sort of a blanket term that really is not addressing singular issues.
Yeah, they've gotten a lot better because I was in, and I'm so happy they've gotten better. But I think I could be mistaken, but I think the guys who do my job now wear like the little computers in their helmet that the NFL guys play, they have as well to measure like pressure, overpressure, shock force. I think I could be wrong on that.
Well, talk to us about your transition back into the real world and what that was like for you. I mean, to leave the noise, and then also, I can't help but think that you're just like, this is boring as shit.
It was. So I had to find an exciting town to live in. So I moved to Austin, Texas. I was a big music fan. So I go to a place where I go in, I'm a war veteran. I'm just chiseled and cut up and ornery and with free time and a little bit of money for the first time in my life. And I just had a blast for like a year. Like, I had a good time.
Do you feel like you were less fearful of taking risks in civilian life because of the experience?
I don't think so.
What do you think you might, like, you've got children. How do you talk to them about this experience? It's hard to distill it into, 3 bullet points, but what are the most meaningful takeaways from your experience as a veteran, but also specifically, within, the EOD technician world?
Yeah. My wife have talked about this at length. We want our kid. They don't know much about what we did in the military because it's just we don't feel it's appropriate for them yet to know what mommy and daddy did at 5 to 11 years old. But, we give them a little taste of what we did. Like we went to a place called Iraq. We went to a place called Afghanistan. We give them sort of the textbook mission of what we did, but we'll tell them eventually, but at a snail's pace. But the way it influences, I think, how we raise our kids is we want them to try new things and don't let people pigeonhole you into a box.
Right.
Like you go back to my size and stature. All my high school coaches and teachers wanted me to play football. Yeah. I didn't want to play football. I was a monster of a person at 15 years old. I didn't want to play football. I wanted to go to math club. That's what I wanted to do. So I refused to be told what the rest of the world expects of me. I want to do what interests me and how I think it will favor me and my family now. And my wife was the same way. She deployed 3 times while in college. She didn't want the traditional college thing. So with our kids, we want them to try different sports, try the baking club at school, try the gardening club, whatever it is. Don't let society and living in the South pigeonhole you into playing football or volleyball or whatever it is. Explore, have fun, try to find good friends, try new things.
Yeah. I'm glad that you say that because there's like a common push, I think, among parents today. Maybe it's more stressed in LA, but if you're at 7 years old and you want to play basketball, you got to play basketball year round. You got to get a coach you got to be in different teams year round. You got to say no to baseball. You got to say no to football, no to soccer, no to tennis. And I just sort of think there's something missing there. I think it's an unfortunate.
I agree. I cannot stand that. I cannot stand that. And it exists here in the South. where they try to route you into things and play like baseball, like year-round baseball. But I love, like, Gabrielle Reese, I think, lives in LA. Like, she is 6'3", long, lean.
Yeah.
She didn't play volleyball growing up. Like, she started at 18.
Yeah.
You kind of have the genetic ability to do it. And I love Wayne Gretzky when he's like, the worst thing that happened to ice hockey was year-round ice hockey.
Yeah.
Get out there, play lacrosse, play ice hockey, play whatever, swim. And I think it's just a more well-rounded person.
Well, I wanted one other subject that I wanted to be sure we talk about was the CDC. And I think it was a lightning rod. Again, I think this was an organization that few people really understood their role until, it's been hoisted on us through every media outlet in 2020. But I talk to us about your experience there, specifically before and leading into COVID. I mean, I know that you suffered a lot of ridicule personally. And then obviously, Fauci's relationship to the CDC has its own lightning rod issues. But I'm hoping that you can give us some of your own personal experience and inform those of us listening what we don't know about the CDC, what we think we know and are getting wrong.
Yeah, even before I worked at the CDC, I just thought it was the hand washing people. Or the, make sure you wear a condom in college people. Yeah, right. I didn't know. And then I go down there on a job interview after USAID. And I went there to work for the Centers for Global Health. So, and the division I worked with, go figure, was to respond to any outbreak in the world, and the government wanted U.S. assistance. So I worked on the diplomatic side of that.
Which seemed sort of far-fetched for decades. Right. Yeah. I mean, because we had never really been privy to that since 1918, I guess.
Yeah, since the Spanish flu, like for the United States at least, but like a lot of Africa and Southeast Asia live with endemic things. Like, I mean, Zika was in Africa long before it hit the Caribbean and the southern part of the United States. So I worked on, initially it was the Global Health Security Program. So we were trying to work with overseas countries to prevent disease outbreak, identify it if it does happen, and then respond. So prevent, detect, respond was our motto. So that works great with countries that want to follow that motto. I got there in the midst of Ebola in 2015, and that was in West Africa, and that was a hot mess. People were literally just bleeding out in the middle of the street in those three countries. It was horrible. Jump ahead 5-6 years, they've implemented what we taught them. And now there's Ebola outbreaks that you don't even make the news. Like they'll just squash it within days. Nobody likes to hear that, I'm trying to think of the term, quarantine people, but it works. It works in certain diseases really well, especially with Ebola. So I got there in the middle of that, working for the global health security agenda. That works out great, like I said, for other countries that follow it. But it's just like the weakest link is the, how do you say it with the chain?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're only as strong as your weakest link. You got
That's right. That's right. So if countries aren't following it and there's cross-border travel, well, it kind of doesn't matter what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
So it's horrible because you want everybody to be playing well and following the same rules. But if one country just isn't at all, and they're not implementing the programs or the prevention programs to prevent certain diseases, simple things like even just like washing your hands after going to the bathroom.
Sure.
If everybody did that in the world after going to the bathroom, that would cut out a lot of illness. But if you're not investing in that, you're going to have issues. So in December of 2019, we started hearing things that were coming out of Southeast Asia about some kind of upper respiratory issue.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. That happens all the time.
Well, and bird flu was a big thing preceding that.
It was multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had, what was it? MERS in Saudi.
Sure.
Like a few years before that. That was before my time at the CDC. Okay, well, the countries that know how will implement their programs and will respond to it. We think it's not going to be a big deal. Most countries didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Then we started hearing reports that people were dying from this, that this is like January timeframe. February just keeps escalating. More and more people are traveling. And if you've ever looked at a map of all the international planes that go back and forth, it's like I could be on a plane now and I could be in Johannesburg, South Africa in like 20 hours, like literally in any city in the world in 20 hours.
Yep.
Just think about especially for respiratory issues or respiratory diseases, infectious ones, how quickly that would just cross-pollinate between travelers. And if it's slow to emerge, the symptoms are slow to emerge, you don't even know you're sick, or you don't even know you're passing it around. So that's why infectious disease is so interesting and kind of scary at the same time. So yeah, fast forward March of 2020, it's just a few days after my youngest daughter was born almost 5 years ago, the world shut down. It seems like it's been 20 years, but it's only been 5 years. So planes were parked, international travel just came to nothing.
The world
economics, it was crazy. So yeah, I was working at the CDC during that time, and I thought just working in that division, like, I just keep going into work. Nope. Unless I was working at a lab, like the laboratorians were allowed to go in, and security and a couple other staffers. But we were like the rest of the world, we became virtual. We were working from home. Everything, all diplomatic calls came through our house up in Alpharetta. It's wild to think about. Did I answer all your question? What else?
Well, I want to explore that a little bit more. So first of all, where do you think the U.S., we're a first world country, the richest country by far. We look at the landmass of, I just stumbled on this website that compares landmass of different countries, and we're actually not that much smaller than China, even though it looks it, but they have 3 times the population that we do. Yeah. And there was a lot of backlash on how we handled it. And look, 2020, hindsight's always 2020, right? So you can always I don't think anyone's saying there weren't mistakes made, but you have to make decisions based on the information you've been provided, and you've got a machete going into the wilderness in pitch black. You don't know the answers. So I guess where I'm going with this is, first of all, we talk about stockpiles. As a first world country, it seems like we could be more prepared in those types of situations. Just starting with PPE. Where do you think the U.S. is? Where do you think our government could have been better prepared, knowing what we went through now?
For COVID specifically?
Or another similar respiratory pandemic?
I don't know where we're at now. I'm sure a lot of things have changed in the past 3 or 4 years since we come down and the vaccines have come out, and we've had a chance to literally breathe and think about what's happened. And I hope that researchers, scientists, people at the CDC, Department of Health and Human Health and Human Services are looking back saying, what could we have done better? And I 100% agree with you. We made decisions based on the data that we had. And that's in everything from business to military operations. And if you get more data later and you change course, humans are really bad at saying, well, you screwed up, didn't you? No, we just found out new information. We needed to change course. Yeah, we didn't do it. If we would have known this earlier, we would have made a better decision earlier, but we didn't. We made decisions based on what we had. And I feel like the public in general, not just the United States, are really bad at wanting to hang up people in the government for, well, you really screwed that up, Courtney. Yeah. Or whoever. Yeah. Looking back on it now, you could have done so many things different. You're right, but we didn't have that information. We didn't know XYZ. Do you think, like, you were able to see the statistics, right, live as this was all unfolding? I'm curious if, travel's one thing, because obviously, I mean, halting plane travel obviously is a huge variable that gets eliminated if you can shut that down. But do you think, let's say, Omaha, Nebraska should be treated differently than Manhattan? Man, that's a good question. How do you enforce that, right? I mean, that's the challenge. Yeah. Well, it's hard to enforce it. You can't you can't make every American stay in place. And I don't think it's necessary either.
Yeah.
But there are steps that I hope we have learned to implement. I didn't even think about this. So when France or the Netherlands, they respond to an outbreak, they respond as France and the Netherlands. When it came to the United States, we responded as 50 states, 4 territories, and the District of Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
We had all the states squabbling. We had the states squabbling with the federal government saying, hey, this is in your best interest. And some states giving us the middle finger, saying states' rights, we're going to do what we think is appropriate.
Right.
Well, maybe it's not. But there was states really got upset at the federal government.
Well, what do you think? What did that tell you? I mean, what's your perception of humanity and people? I think, moments of stress tend to show all of us who we really are.
Yes.
And in some cases that's heroism at its greatest. I think of President Bush standing on the rubble after 9/11, really sort of stepping into that role in a spectacular way.
Yes.
But it also can bring out the worst of us and sort of our most demonic lower base selves. And I don't know, has that influenced how you view your fellow compatriots, your other civilians, that your other voters? Like, I don't know how to best ask this question, but I can only imagine the ridicule and the challenges you faced of, like, I mean, at some point you got to ask, like, is this even worth doing anymore?
Oh,
but
thoughts.
But you're doing the right things, right?
Yeah.
You have to stand for something.
So, again, 2 parts to this. Have you ever watched the movie Men in Black?
Sure.
Love that movie. Well, there's a movie in that where Will Smith's like, why don't we just tell everybody about the aliens? And he's like, a person is intelligent, rational, but people are scared and violent. And that is exactly what happened in 2020. If I could sit down with one person and talk to them about the statistics, what's actually going on, they're going to come to their own rational conclusion, and it's usually a good one. But Fauci couldn't do that. You can't get online and say, this is why you should be wearing a mask, because 200 million people said, screw you, and flipped him the bird.
Sure.
Like, okay, what do you do? You can't force people to wear it. Yeah. And then, I wanted to go back to, you mentioned George W. Bush on the rubble. That's a great example of, he made decisions for invading Iraq. He made decisions based on the intelligence and data that he had. It was the wrong one. I still don't think we should have invaded Iraq.
Yeah.
But I also support the fact, and he was brave enough to say, this is why we should. Here's the reason why. And I saw some of that intelligence post invasion. I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. Sure. That makes sense. That looks like a chemical weapons factory. It wasn't, but I get it. I'm very forgiving of people now at 47 years old who made the best decisions with the data they had. If it ends up being wrong, I'll slap them on the back. Like, you did your best. It didn't work out, but you tried. That's more than most people are willing to do. I'd rather try and fail.
I agree.
I agree.
And I did have a congressman on before, and one thing he mentioned about ego, which I found pretty interesting, is that you do need to have some vanity in what you're saying, because you have to have a backbone. You actually have to stake your claim as, I believe this is right, even if that may prove later that I was wrong. But I stand for something. Right. And it's a lot easier to be in the peanut gallery throwing darts at the players on the field. It's harder to be on the field, pushing the ball forward. Yeah, it is hard. You're exactly right. Like, everybody in the stands has an opinion. Totally. But when you're out there tossing the ball around, like, we missed the catch. Yeah. Yeah. This was so illuminating. I really am grateful that you graced us with this perspective. You have such a unique take on so many different aspects because of the experience you've had. So few. I mean, your experience is probably less. The number of people with your experience, you'd have a higher likelihood of becoming the MVP of the NFL. than actually attaining your experience. So I appreciate you bringing that to this audience. I'm curious, as we bring this in for landing, any closing thoughts or things you think I might have missed?
No, not right now. Let's go back to COVID for just a second. And this goes to anything. Find really reputable sources that are peer reviewed by other experts, that if you question something, whether the earth is round or not, or whatever you're reading, always double check who wrote it and see if there's other experts in that field who have read it and just at least given their head nod like it's okay. I love peer-reviewed articles because it's gone through the gauntlet and the devil's advocate of review. So when you see something that comes out and I'm trying to think, the New England Journal of Medicine, that shit's been reviewed a lot.
Right.
Maybe in 20 years, some of it might be misdirected, but it's the best we got right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, always look about what you're reading. So I'm very particular about what I read.
That's great advice. Thank you, Courtney.
You bet. It's good to see you.
Likewise, man. Thanks for listening. For a detailed list of episodes and show notes, visit scalesofsuccesspodcast.com. If you found this conversation engaging, consider signing up for our newsletter, where we go even deeper on a weekly basis, sharing exclusive insights and actionable strategies that can help you in your own journey. We'd also appreciate if you subscribed, rated, or shared today's episode. It helps us to attract more illuminating guests, adding to the list of enlightening conversations we've had with New York Times bestsellers, producers, founders, CEOs, congressmen, and other independent thinkers who are challenging the status quo. You can also follow us for updates, extra content, and more insights from our guests. We hope to have you back again next week for another episode of Scales of Success. Scales of Success is an Edge West Capital production.